Good morning. I just want to go over some basic watercolor techniques. We're going to look at how to start with our semi-moist pan, how to control the intensity of our colors using a palette, and then we'll talk about some basic brush strokes and surface treatments with watercolor. So you have a clean container of water, an assortment of brushes, and you're just going to add a brush load of water to each color. And then in my palette, you can see that I have a couple of puddles of nice clean water. Okay, and then what I can do is pick up or load my brush with my desired pigments, my colors. These might look like dollar store watercolors, which we all have in our junk drawers at home, but they are actually nice intense pigments. We can get some really great colors and effects out of these colors. Okay, we can mix our own colors. We can get a nice blue-green or a pretty yellow-orange. Okay, remember your color theory as you're preparing your palette today. I want to see you create 3 or 4 colors. Okay, and let's get a variety of warm and cool colors happening so we have some visual excitement in our piece. All right, so once we have a good range of intensities, then we're going to move to our actual brush strokes and washes. Okay, I always keep a paper towel beside me. When you're watercoloring, it's a good idea to have 2 water containers, one for rinsing your brush and one that stays clean. Let's start with some simple techniques like wet into wet. I am just going to get my paper a little damp first. And the cool part about this is then my paint only goes one of 2 places, either where my paper is damp or where my brush touches. So we can keep things really controlled by applying water and paying careful attention to where we're putting our brush. Okay, so wet into wet is a pretty uncontrolled, experimental spread of paint, but it can activate your space and it can make your painting really exciting. Okay, if we use related colors, they mix and blend to make new colors. Okay, the next one we're going to try is a flat wash. So we're going to rinse our brush really well. We are going to get our section wet where we want to paint. I'm just going to do a tall rectangle here. I'm looking at my paper from the side and making sure that I don't have any big puddles or areas where water is just sitting there. In an ideal world, I would have my paper all taped down. Okay, I'll start with some purple. And I just want to spread my pigment evenly across my surface. So I'm gonna go all in one direction, and then I'll go back in the other direction to gently smooth out my brush stroke. So my brush stroke should kind of go away. All right, pretty even. If I have any big puddles forming, I can dry off my brush and I can lift those puddles to make it more even. Watercolor does dry a little lighter than when you put it on, so keep that in mind as you're applying it or as you're mixing your pigments in your palette. Okay, let's take a look at one that's a little more labor intensive, the graded wash. We're gonna make, again, a nice, clean, damp area. Just a little puddle of water that's nice and smooth. Look at it from the side, make sure you don't have any big floods going on. Okay, then I'll pick a color like this turquoise we mixed. And I'm gonna move from left to right, from intense, I'm gonna rinse and brush it on the side, to less intense. Okay, I'm gonna rinse and brush it on the side, and I should be able to move from a bright color to a less intense color. Let's bump up that contrast a little bit so you can see it. Add a little more blue, a little more green. Okay, so I've got my bright, intense pigment here. Yeah, I'm gonna rinse on the cup, wipe it off. Okay, rinse on the cup, wipe it off. make it a little drier maybe even, and move from that darker area, rinse. There we go. Great way to fade from intense to very pale, or to make a tint using your paper. Something else I want you to think about is how you can make a soft edge versus a hard edge. So if we just paint something like a damp spot on our paper, and then we pick a color and paint a circle, it will spread, right, and be very soft. Versus if we use the same color on dry paper, we'll get a nice crisp edge. Okay. Remember that we have lots of brush strokes we can use to activate our space. Thick, thin. Okay, got that hard edge versus that soft edge. Dry paper for the background, damp paper for the background. Okay, so far we've done wet into wet, flat, graded, soft edges, and hard edges. And last but not least, I want to show you some more experimental techniques. So let's create some textures. Again, you've seen what a damp background versus a dry one does. So let's make a little damp spot and a dry spot. And then we'll pick up some color with a toothbrush. Okay, and then we'll splatter it. And you can see what it looks like on dry paper versus wet paper. Kind of moves in that water versus sticking right where you put it on the dry paper. Okay. Another technique we can do is to paint either first or second. So we'll paint first. And then if we scratch into it, like with our handle, that paint will look darker or more intense where we scratch, because the paint is pooling into those scratches we're making. We can also wait until it's dry, and then we can scratch the pigment off the surface, like with a paper clip or a piece of wire. Okay, last but not least, I want to show you what alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, does to watercolor. So I have a nice clean brush. I have a still wet painted surface, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. I'll pick it up with my nice clean brush and touch it or drip it onto my paint. Whew. Pretty exciting. Okay, you guys, the expectation is that you try 4 of these and master 4 of these. So keep trying until you get the surface texture you like. Wet into wet, flat, graded, soft edges, hard edges, splattering with a toothbrush on dry or wet paper, scratching to create texture, and experimenting with rubbing alcohol. These will serve as a background for your printmaking piece. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your creating.